Hey everyone, welcome back to She Blurbs podcast. Today's guest is Mark Leslie. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me here, Brooke. So I've been a writer, wanted to be a writer my entire life. I started off when I was 14 years old, hammering stuff out on an old Underwood typewriter I found in my mom's closet. And I collected rejections, had my first story published in 1992. I have more than 25 books out now. I have books I write, true ghost story books, which you can kind of tell with the skulls in the background. That's sort of a theme that I go. I write thrillers, I write horror. I've got a Canadian Werewolf series, which is sort of dark humor, urban fantasy. And I also have books for writers. And so I define myself as a book lover, book nerd, writer, editor, book industry sort of guy. And I am I need to be clear with you, I am still afraid of the monster under my bed, which is probably why I write the scary stuff.
That's awesome. You said you write books for authors, like you help them guide, like you guide authors. It
Yeah.
is? Oh.
Yeah, because I've worked in the book industry since actually 1992, the same year I published my first short story. I started working as a bookseller and I've worked in the book industry ever since. And so what I do is I advise authors on publishing advice because I've worked in the industry for so long. I have experience with traditional publishing. I do work with traditional publishers. I have a lot of experience with self-publishing. So depending on what the author is looking for, I can probably help them because I understand sort of both sides of this crazy world of writing and publishing.
Mhm. That's awesome. So when did you first realize you wanted to be an author?
I was a little kid. I was playing with these little Fisher Price figures when I was a kid, and I didn't just play. I had these continuing serialized stories, and when I would return to play, it would be like "to be continued." I knew I wanted to tell story. I didn't fall in love with the written word until I got a little bit older, and I discovered what a lot of writers discover, and this is the magic that happens of the permanence. Because when I play with the stories, when I play with the figures, and I imagine these stories, they're gone. They're in the ether, and they're gone the moment it's over. But when you write something down, you put it on paper, and you leave, and someone else picks it up and reads it. The story becomes theirs, and
Yeah.
and and that's the beauty and magic of books is that people can share stories. For example, you and I have never met Shakespeare, but I'm sure we're familiar with some of the works that he's done, and so this magic can happen with books. And so I kind of fell in love with that early on. I did submit my first story to a market to try to get it published in when I was 15 years old. Got my first rejection as a writer when I was 15. I got plenty of other rejections, of course, when I was 15, but that was my first writing rejection.
That's awesome. What's your family think of your writing whenever you did submit the books and when you were writing?
My mom, God bless her, she's a romance lover, and I don't write romance, so she would always say, "Mark, why can't you write a nice book?" Because I tend to write stuff a little bit darker and scarier with monsters and things in the shadows, and so yeah, I haven't yet. I mean, my latest novel has a bit more romance in it, so maybe she might enjoy that more. But yeah, it's not. It hasn't been my family's cup of tea, I'm afraid.
Gotcha. Yeah. So where do you get your ideas from when you think of your stories?
They come from everywhere. I think the challenge that I have as a writer is I'm bombarded, thousands of times a day with ideas, and ideas come from almost anything. So, for example, the idea for my Canadian Werewolf novel came from when I was in New York, and I was walking through Battery Park, and it was like a slightly green area, and obviously in right downtown, right outside of the financial district of Manhattan. So very populous area during the day, but there's a certain time of the day where there's no population there whatsoever. And I imagined a person as a werewolf, like waking up in the park, and what it might be like to try to live with the side effect of being a werewolf living in a major city like that, where there's very few green spaces to run around as a wolf. And then what might happen, like the logistics of clothes. Where would you get clothes? Like you would have to have a stash somewhere. You would have to think of these things ahead of time. So a lot of the ideas I have are what if situations. What if this happened? And then that kind of kickstarts the writing. And then I imagine a character. Well, who is that character? And and why are they in that situation, or how did they get themselves in that situation, and how might they get that out? How might they get out of that situation? And so, yeah, a lot of the stuff that I write just comes from wondering what if, for whatever situation I'm in or a conversation I overhear. It could be almost anything. That's the joy and maybe the frustration of having so many ideas.
I know, I agree with you, because every time I go to sleep, my mind wanders everywhere, and I'm like, ooh, I could write this book about this and about that, and then I wake up and I forget. So I'm like, maybe I need to go to bed with like a pen and paper in case I write in my sleep.
you should, you never know. While it's fresh, just jot it down, and then you might not be able to read the what you scribbled.
Right. So can you give our listeners just a brief summary of a few of your novels?
Yeah, so like I said, A Canadian Werewolf in New York is the first book in that series, which basically is just a day in the life of a man. He's a Canadian, so he's a beta human and an alpha wolf. So he's a bit of a pushover as a human, but as a wolf, he's obviously a tougher character. And it's just a day in the life of him. That's followed by Stowaway, which is basically him as a werewolf being stuck on a train as it's about to be the night of a full moon. And then Fear and Longing in Los Angeles is the next one in that series, where he goes to Hollywood and he encounters a hate group that he's up against, and also trying to escape a broken heart, where this is where the romance comes in. So there's a bit of a romantic element. I've also got other books which are true ghost story books, Haunted Hospitals, which kind of explores, hospitals that are haunted throughout North America and the world. Tomes of Terror, one of my passionate places to be are bookstores and libraries, and so Tomes of Terror is haunted bookstores and libraries, again throughout North America, so that's a passionate one. And so yeah, those are some of the nonfiction true ghost story books and some of the fiction that I have out there.
That's amazing. So this is outside of the questions I was going to ask you, but I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and we have Waverly Hills. So have you ever been to Waverly Hills? I've been there a few times.
I have not had the pleasure, but I did write about Waverly Hills in Haunted Hospital. Actually, my co-author Rhonda wrote about Waverly Hills, and Waverly Hills is one of the most haunted buildings in America.
And every time they go with me, they're like, "You really don't hear anything. You really don't see anything." I'm like, "No." Maybe it's because I don't believe that I'm not hearing anything, but everybody else does, and they get scared, and I'm just like, I just don't see it. I don't feel it.
Yeah, that one had so many different stories, so many different ghosts. Like there was the big shadow people, all kinds of things. That was a terrifying one. So no, I haven't been to that one. I've been to the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia, in West Virginia. Went on a great tour there. Probably it was about 6 months after the book came out. So it's really cool to go on a tour of a place after you've already researched it and written about it. But I'm a big chicken. And so my partner and I went, it was the middle of the day, thank goodness. And it was amazing. We were the only people on the tour. It was just, I think, the two of us and the tour guide. So we kind of had his full attention. So we got to ask tons of questions, because sometimes when you're with a huge group, you may not get to ask questions. But yeah, it was a really amazing experience. But thank goodness it was a bright, sunny day when we were there. Because it was just a little bit too scary.
It's really hard to get into Waverly Hills here. Like, they have a waiting list, like, that's like months back. I'm like, so I gotta wait until next July to get in? Wow. They're like, yeah, like it's a waiting list, a huge waiting list. So
it's tough. They can get really, really popular, especially once things start to open up again and people are really eager to get out.
Oh yeah. So who are a few of your favorite authors, and have any of them inspired a few of your novels?
You can't write scary stories without being inspired by Stephen King. I think I've read his book On Writing numerous times, but Different Seasons is my favorite of his, which is the sort of non-horror collection of stories. As Stand By Me was one of the stories that came out of that. Richard Lehman was also a great horror writer. But I think Michael Connelly, I know it sounds strange because he writes a mystery. But a lot of the stuff that I've learned from Harry Bosch, who is his detective, Michael Connolly, is he says Bosch's mandate is everyone counts or nobody counts. And as a detective, he doesn't care who the person is in society, what class they're in, whatever. If they've been murdered, it's his job to solve their murder. So it doesn't matter if it's the mayor of the city or it's a homeless person who just died. He wants justice for everyone. And so I've applied that principle to my personal life, and it's inspired me, because when I go out and I talk to writers, and I train writers, and I help writers, and I coach them and I teach them, but there's not a single writer that I've worked with that can't teach me something. Because again, that mandate, everyone counts or nobody counts. So I think if you stop recognizing the value that you can glean from the knowledge and wisdom that everyone has. No, for example, Brooke, you're talking about the ideas you have for books and stuff like that. The wonderful thing about that is you're the best person to write that book that you want to write than anyone else. And we have to recognize the value that we bring. So if you and I, for example, had an idea to write about Waverly Hills, and a skeptical person whose friends really want to go on a tour with her there, and we're going to tell the story, I would write a particular type of story, and you could write the exact same scenario, but you would bring something unique and different to it, and we would both have two uniquely interesting books. So I think I love being inspired by things I read. I think maybe Stan Lee, who created Spider-Man, Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. If I had to say that was a thing that I tried to take and own, I even apply that in my Canadian Werewolf novel. I have, the main character is a huge fan of Spider-Man, and therefore he tries to help people with his powers. So yeah, I think I'm always inspired by the things that I read. So it never ends, I think.
Nice. So do you ever this is outside of the question, Sue, do you ever have online seminars to where you help authors go live and help them? You do?
Yeah, I do. I do a free 20-minute consultation. It's available. You can click on it and just book it directly on my website, where we just chat. We talk about whatever you're interested in. I do I do plenty of virtual video chats and workshops and stuff like that. I've got stuff scheduled into the throughout the summer, because probably not doing my first in-person events not till I go to Nashville in September, where I'm actually going to be hopefully in front of a real live audience with people in the room. We'll see how that goes.
Wow, I might go down there, because it's only 6 hours from here. So
it's not too far. Yeah.
So
it's the Career Author Summit that's the name of that one that I'm going to.
Oh, okay. Is it on your website? Can I go on your website?
Yeah, I think there's a link on my website that shows under news, and it shows all the forthcoming events that I'm doing. That's one of the ways to find. And yeah, I get to go to some really awesome writer conferences. So really good just to go check out those writers. One I should let you know about is in August, When Words Collide is normally in Calgary, Alberta, and that's a bit farther away than 6-hour drive for you. It's virtual this year, and it's free. You have to register to be able to get in. But they're going to have 3 days of amazing workshops. I know I'm doing a few workshops there, but I highly recommend that. Might be very inspiring for you. And that's usually the first weekend in August.
Oh, okay. I'm going to contact you after this so I can remember, link it on my laptop so I can remember, because I have a lot of things going on.
Sure you do.
So what was your hardest scene to write, and why?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Hardest scene to write is in a book that I have not yet released. It was actually the first full novel that I finished as an adult, and it's still has not been published. It's one of the ones I keep going back to, and that often happens with your first book. And it was me trying to come to terms with my fear of my dad dying. And so that was the premise of the book is this guy's father dies, and he has to spread his ashes at his father's favorite fishing hole, but his father kept his favorite fishing hole a secret, because that's what fishermen do. And so he spends the course of the novel trying to figure out if he can find his father's secret fishing hole. It's like one of those personal quest stories. No horror at all. There's a bit of a mystery in it. the scene where he's doing the eulogy at his father's funeral was so difficult for me because I can write things that have meaning and passion and power. But the minute I try to say them out loud, I get so emotional. I just blubber and I go, ah! And I'm just a big sobbing mess. And so while I was writing the scene, I did the same sort of thing with my character where I wrote what he wanted to say, all the beautiful things he was going to talk about, how much he loved his father and all these great things. But then when he actually gets up there, so he has it all in his head, what his speech is going to be as a practice. When he gets up there, he just kind of goes, yeah, Dad was a good guy. And he just starts blubbering. And then he just says like 5-6 words and then shuts it down. So everyone thinks he's a cold, heartless person, but he just doesn't want to make a, look like a blubbering mess. So that was a difficult scene because I remember while I was writing it, I remember bawling while I was typing, looking through the tears to try to see the screen. Yeah, that was a tough one.
Yeah, I wow, like it's making me get emotional listening to it. Like, that's my fear about writing. Like, I don't want to write a hard scene. Like, I know with my personal novel, I know I'm gonna cry because it's gonna bring up memories of things I went through. So I know that's gonna be my hard scene. So, what advice would you give to help others who want to pursue a writing career?
I would advise to be patient with yourself because it's really hard. It's not easy. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of dedication, and it's a thing you kind of have to do on your own. Especially when you want to do things with friends or family and you have other commitments. You got to walk the dog. All those things get in the way. So the thing that to get my first book done, I started getting up half an hour earlier for work every morning. And I would spend that first half hour writing. And even if I only got 50 words down, I was 50 words more. And the next day, if I only got 50 words or 10 words, that's 10 words more. And at the end of the year, that may be whatever that is. I mean, right now I'm working on my next book in the Canadian Werewolf series, and I wanted to give myself an easy timeline. So I said, all right, I'm going to commit to the very first hour when I get up after I feed the dogs and cats, put on the coffee, I get an hour, I'm going to write 600 words. And some days I hit 1,200 words, 1,500, 2,000 words. Some days I only write 200. But I have this kind of vision of 600 words a day, meaning that it's going to be close to 20,000 words, maybe 18,000. I can't do the math well at the end of the month. And I realized, well, that's 20,000 more words that I didn't have. And so I think if you're interested in writing and you want to write, the first thing you have to do is commit to your own ability to do that by carving out some time. For me, it's first thing in the morning before I open up my email, before I get distracted by all the things going on outside. It's me, my imagination. You come fresh from the dreams and you write. And even if you're not inspired to write about the fact that you're not inspired. Writing begets writing. And I find that if I just start, if I fall off and I start thinking about, I gotta do some shopping today. I gotta pick up dog food or whatever, or cat litter, or I've got to get more bread. I will sometimes just write those words so that at least my words are still flowing, and then I can cut them later or copy them into a shopping list. And instead of stopping and going, I don't know what to write. So instead I'll type, I don't know what to write. Why don't I know what to write? And then I have a dialogue with myself, and that sometimes kicks me out of the writer's block or whatever it is that's preventing me. Because I think once you start flowing those words, sometimes once you open, it's like the faucet. Once you get the plug unplugged, it starts to flow. And so you just see if you can do that. Give yourself some time, and then you've got words. And then once you have the words, then they can be edited and fixed and polished. But you got to start with the words on a page, usually.
I do have a question. It's outside of the question I was going to ask you, but so would it be best to outline the story before just writing, or do you just write? Like, I outline. I'm an organized person, so I prefer to outline, but I don't know if that's a good idea to do that.
Well, I think you have to go with your passion and what you're good at. So you're an organized person. You've got everything scheduled and implemented, and you probably need that structure for an outline, because it's easier. So once you know exactly what's happening, all you got to do is flesh it out. So think of a outline as like a skeleton, right? And what you're doing when you write is, okay, now we're going to put some flesh, we're going to put some muscle, we're going to put some sinew, we're going to put some arteries in there, we're going to put some skin, and then slowly build it out. So you're starting with something. Me, I'm more of a pantser, or what I like to say, a discovery writer. I kind of know, here's what's going to happen roughly. Things are going to happen. And then I kind of just sit down and go, let's see what happens. Let's put these characters in a situation and let's see what they do. So for me, I do a really sketchy light outline, because for me, I want to get into it. Whereas for a writer like you, I bet you'd probably feel more comfortable knowing exactly, okay, today I'm going to work on this scene, or today or here. And when you outline, you can jump around a lot better. I have difficulty jumping around in like from chapter 1 to chapter 8 or whatever. I tend to write sequentially. So that may be easier, because then you can go, well, I need to do research on Waverly Asylum or whatever. I need to bring that back up. I need to do research, so I'm not going to write that chapter yet. And I did that actually the other day. I needed research on the Brooklyn Diner in Manhattan, and I needed to do some research with the police to discover how would they react in a situation. So I skipped the scene, put square brackets, and said, "Get research, come back," and then I jumped to the next scene. But I didn't go ahead too far. Fortunately, I got the great information that I needed, and I went back and I fleshed that all out. But that probably would work for you, I think.
Yeah, that sounds like something I would do. Yeah. So what do you enjoy doing when you're not writing?
I'm a big fan of craft beer, and obviously I like skeletons and spooky stories and stuff like that. So yeah, when, non-pandemic times, I travel a lot for work, and one of my favorite things to do would be I love discovering local restaurants and places like, unique mom and pop shops, whether it's bookstores or restaurants or whatever the store is, and local craft beer, because just so many great places throughout North America. I mean, throughout the world, but yeah, that's just a passion of mine.
So if you ever come to Louisville, then let me know. And then there's this, we have a brewery here, and they craft their own beer. It's good. And they'll give you like this little plate, and you can try like 8 different beers. And some of it's nice. I'm not really a beer drinker, but some of it's good.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then you're in Kentucky, you said, right?
Yeah, I'm in Louisville by Churchill Downs. Like, I'm walking distance to Churchill Downs.
Wow. Okay, cool. Yeah, I bet you there's some great breweries there. I don't think I've had the pleasure of exploring any in your state.
Yeah, there's one that's really, really good. They got good food too. But Bowen, thank you so much for coming on my show and allowing me to interview you today.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great to chat with you.
You have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to my interview with Mark Leslie. So he is an author of many amazing novels and amazing books. If you would like to purchase any of his books or see what he's what he's doing and his conferences and things, you can go to his website. It's linked below. It says Mark's website, and then you can just copy it or you can type it out and check out his work. Thank you all so much for supporting me and so much for listening to my podcast. I really do greatly appreciate it. And thank you all for sharing.